Let's talk about my first microscope and why I got it. My first microscope was the Carson MicroBright Pro pocket microscope. I bought this microscope at the B&H Superstore in New York City. I was working on a video series called The History of Photo Editing Explored Through Photoshop. I wanted to illustrate how a modern digital print works and what they have in common with the photographic processes from the 19th and 20th century. I attempted to capture the image using a macro lens, extension tubes, and diopters. All you need to know about extension tubes is that they allow you to focus much closer to the image, with the downside of losing a lot of light, making the image dark and making it very hard to get a nice sharp image. I also use close-up filters you screw onto the front of the lens to increase magnification. These can lead to a steep reduction in image quality, but they do allow you to focus extremely close. I was having trouble getting enough light to get a clear image, so I used a non-macro lens, which was able to take in a large amount of light. I also attached the extension tubes and the close-up filters to the lens. However, the depth of field was so thin that focusing became practically impossible, and I still couldn't get the required magnification that I needed. Quick explanation of depth of field. The depth of field in photography is influenced by several factors: the lens's magnification value, the focal length, and the f-number, also known as aperture, and how close your lens is to the subject. The bigger the focal length, the bigger the magnification value, the smaller the f-number, the less things will be in focus. The smaller the magnification value, the smaller the focal length, the larger the f-number, the more things that will be in focus. Now, with that explanation done, back to the review. Realizing that a macro lens, extension tubes, and close-up filters wouldn't be enough, I realized that I needed a microscope. I was planning to go up to visit my sister for Christmas, and I realized I would be visiting the B&H Superstore, and they had microscopes on display, and I would be able to try out one. So I come prepared with the black and white film print and a printout of a digital photo. So I walk up, explain the project, and ask how I hook my camera up to one of these microscopes. So I asked. It suggested some techniques I can try, but I already did that. So I'm walking over there, Carson Microscope. He stops me and says, "Try this." He says, and I say, "What's this?" He says, "Give this a go." And lo and behold, I was able to get the image I need. However, realizing with a heavy heart, there's more images that I needed to capture than I bought with me. I asked with a heavy heart. I asked, "How much is this going to set me back?" He says, $18. He said, "Yes." He said, "Most people think that they need the big ones, but most of them don't." He says, "We always have everybody try these first." And boy, was I grateful. And this is why I exclusively buy all my tech stuff from B&H. They are always looking out for you, the consumer. Then I said, okay, I guess I'm now the proud owner of a microscope. So I bought the microscope back to my hotel, played with it a bit, brought it home, captured all the images I needed, but the graphic designer in me and the photographer in me discovered that I really liked microscopy. So I got another one, plus one more. I got a Carson Flip MP, 100x magnification to 250x magnification. Next one was the Carson Mini pocket microscope, 20x magnification. Now with that done, with the 3 microscopes laid out, let's move on to the build quality and then the image quality. Let's start by talking about the phone clips for them. They're fine for what they are. They are a tad finicky though, but for what they cost, I'm not complaining. In my experience, most phone camera clips are kind of finicky anyway. And no, I don't have a phone clip for the tiniest microscope I have here. They do make one, but I don't have that. I just wanted to note that quickly. All 3 microscopes have good build quality. However, with the third, the Carson Microscope Pocket Mini being the worst of them. But its build quality is pretty good, considering it only costs $10.49. Now, for the build quality to the 2 big ones, well, relatively big. Starting with Carson Microscope Flip Pro LED Zoom Pocket Microscope. The quality on this is frankly excellent for being made out of plastic. I think the optics for this microscope are made out of glass. However, the MicroMini Pocket pocket microscope, I'm pretty sure its optic is made out of plastic, which is suboptimal, but its image quality is still pretty good. But we'll talk more about image quality later. Both of the two big microscopes are zooms. The zoom that allows you to change the magnification value frankly feels excellent. It's stiff, smooth, and precise, which is precisely what you want for a precise optic like this. The focusing ring is also very nice. It feels extremely premium, like on my vintage Minolta lens or other very nice high-end camera lens. After I'm done discussing the build quality, I will briefly discuss the difference between a zoom optic and a prime optic like you find on a traditional compound microscope. Now moving on to the second microscope, the Carson Flip pocket microscope. The focusing ring and the zoom are the same as the first microscope. Excellent. It has the same controls except for a few controls for the light. We'll talk more about this later when we get into the features of each of these microscopes. Now, what about the keychain pocket microscope? Its focusing ring is the least precise out of all of them, and it has the least magnification. However, due to it being the least magnified, it is actually the easiest to focus. Its control surfaces don't feel as nice as the other two, but hey, it's the cheapest of the bunch. The other thing to note about this build quality, it is next to impossible to change its batteries. It's theoretically possible, but when I tried, I couldn't get the batteries back in. So if the batteries go out, just plan on replacing this one, which is the biggest con of it. The other ones run on AA's. They're all frankly a little tight, but you can get the AA's in easily enough on both of them. Versus the really tiny one, you're not getting them back in at all. As promised, here's a quick explanation of a zoom optic versus a prime optic. A zoom is any optic that can vary its focal length or magnification value. This is a traditional microscope optic, like you find in a compound microscope. Prime optic is able to gather more light than a zoom optic. Prime optics tend to have better image quality than zoom optics. However, the zoom mechanism of these optics allows them to be packable and portable. Now that we're done with the build quality and the quick explanation of what's the difference between a prime and a zoom optic, now let's move into talking about their special features. The Carson MicroBright only has a light to illuminate your subject, versus the Carson Flip pocket microscope. It has a slide stage and a special light, what engages when you engage the microscope stage, and a black light, which is a pretty neat feature you can use to see how clean your hotel room actually is. Types of subjects that glow underneath that type of light. But I'm not a scientist, so the black light is just a cool bonus. Now, on to the smallest of the optics, the Carson Micro Mini pocket microscope. As stated before, this has the worst build quality out of all of them. It has a black light and an LED to light up the subject, as well as having a flashlight setting, so you can use it like a flashlight. The Carson Flip also has this feature too. Did I mention it has the keychain lanyard, which is fantastic. Moving on to the usability. Let's move on to discussing the usability. The microscopes with the best usability are the Carson Micro Mini 20x magnification pocket microscope and the Carson MicroBrite. This is because they have the least magnification out of the three. You see, the bigger the focal length, the bigger the magnification value, the less depth of field. This is the area that will be in focus versus the areas that won't be in focus. The bigger the magnification value, the harder it will be to focus the lens. The downside of the usability for both of these microscopes is they must be placed directly on your subject in order to render an image. They will not even focus if they are a fingernail's length away from the subject. Let's move on to the biggest of the group, the Carson Flip, with its 100 to 250 magnification. I get the best results with this microscope while using this clamp system. It keeps it stabilized, so it's easier to focus. You can still get good image quality out in the field with this, but it's a little harder out of the two. The two I keep on me when I'm out and about is the Carson MicroBright Mini 20x magnification and the Carson MicroBrite 60 to 120x magnification. These are the two I recommend for pretty much everybody to start with. Moving on to who I think these are for, and then the image quality. Let's discuss who I think each one of these microscopes is best for. for. If you're a scientist, I think you would be better off with the Carson Micro Flip with its 100x magnification to 260x magnification. I think if you're a photographer or graphic designer, the other two will be much easier to use and be much more fun. If you decide that you're really into this, you can get the Carson Micro Flip. If you're a backyard scientist, hobbyist, I still recommend the other two microscopes because you can still see cell structure using both of them. Alright, last but not least, image quality. We're going to be looking at the image quality for each of these three microscopes captured through my iPhone 13 Pro. Since these microscopes are meant to be used with a phone, we must establish the base image quality of my iPhone 13. We will do that by using my phone on the third lens of my iPhone. This lens gives me the least amount of vignetting. I can zoom in further using a digital zoom, but this would result in poor image quality. So we'll start by working at this photo here at normal focusing distance, and then a photo taken at macro focusing distance or close focusing distance. Okay, let's get started by taking a look at this image with my phone taken at normal focusing distances. Let's zoom into 100% and take a look around. Image quality in the center of the image looks excellent. Let's take a look in the corners now. The corner image quality also looks excellent. That's pretty much what I was expecting. Let's move on to the second photo at close focusing distances now. Let's zoom into 100%. Once again, the image quality looks excellent. Now with that done, we can explore the image quality of each of these microscopes at their effective magnification value. Let's start off with the smallest of the bunch, the Carson Micro Mini. Let's take a look at my leather wallet at 20x magnification. Keep in mind that I do not have the phone clip for this one, so its image quality actually looks much better in person than it does in this image, but you can still get a rough idea of what it looks like. This blurring and vignetting is caused by putting the microscope up close to the eyepiece. Let's zoom in a bit. You can see the image quality is not that great, but you can still make out the cell structure of the leather wallet. Let's take a look at the image quality of the Carson MicroBright Pro at its minimum magnification of 60x magnification. Let's zoom into 100%, shall we? You can see at 100% magnification, we have decent image quality. It's not perfect, but it's still more than usable, especially if you're trying to just get textures, and it actually looks way sharper in person. It's just a downside of the phone clip method, but you can clean these up and get them to look much sharper than they actually are. The other big problem with this microscope is the chromatic aberration. That's that blue stuff. This is an optical flaw in this microscope, but if we switch over to Lightroom here, it's an easy enough problem to fix. Let's take a look at its maximum magnification at 120x magnification. We're going to look now at this pizza box. Let's zoom in to 100% and look around. As you can see, the image quality looks pretty good. Keep in mind, this microscope is only $18, so I don't really think there's much to complain about the image quality, but you can clean these up so they look extra sharp. And as before, it has the chromatic aberration on the bright contrasting edges. But for how little this microscope costs, it is very common to see this type of lens defect or lens aberration in cheaper optics. So you get what you pay for. You buy a nice big high-end microscope, you're not going to see stuff like this, but it's easy enough to get rid of. Let's move on to the Carson Flip, starting at 100x magnification. Let's zoom in to 100. As you can see, the image quality is okay. It's not the greatest or the best, and it actually looks sharper in person than it does for the phone clip. We see the chromatic aberration, but pretty normal. And these photos clean up really good, and you could increase more resolution than what you can actually see, which I'll show you after we talk about the image quality for this microscope. Let's move on to the 250x magnification, and let's zoom in to 100%. This one is the most difficult to focus, and its image quality is really not all that great at this 250x magnification, but it does look much sharper in person than it does for the phone clip. This one is the most difficult to focus, and its image quality is really not all that great. Let's take a look at this autochrome. You want to learn more about what this is, you can check out my series on the history of photo editing explored through Photoshop, or this short here. All I'm going to say for now is that you're looking at the color screen used to make up the color image you're seeing on screen right now. I don't know if this is just due to it's not an actual slide, but this is the resolution I was able to get out of it. I think this is still actually usable as a texture. Same goes at 250x magnification, which is fine if you're going to use it as a texture like I do for my graphic design. As promised, here's some cleanup demonstration. Let's take a look at this one that's pretty out of focus. We're going to pour up the contrast a bit. We're going to pour up the texture. We're going to pour up the clarity, and we're going to pour up the dehaze. And we're going to bring down the highlights a bit. And we're going to bring up the shadows a bit, as well as the black. As you can see, that's already an improvement. But the other thing I can do is run it through this app called Topaz Photo AI. Let's do that. Here it is. Copy. See, it automatically applies sharpening. That's its natural setting. Let's put on its strong setting. Prefer. After. Quite the difference. Here's a montage of some of the images I captured using this microscope through the soundtrack of my intro theme song. Before I go, quick thing to note, when focusing, focus them without the phone attached. Once you get the focus, then attach the phone, take the photo, or record video. Focusing it with the phone attached will cause the phone's autofocus system to engage, making it much more difficult to focus, if not completely impossible in most instances. Well, now for the credits. Thank you for watching. If you want to support the channel, please like and subscribe. And turn the bell notification on. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram. You can support me on Redbubble, Society6, and Adobe Stock.